I now move on to the very important question, was there an Alexandrian canon? Now this goes back to the fact that manuscripts of the Septuagint include in their manuscripts books of the Apocrypha. They also organize the Old Testament books differently. And so does the inclusion of books of the Apocrypha in the Septuagint imply a different canon for Jews in Egypt as compared with Jews in Palestine around the time of Jesus? Now this chart shows some of the complexity of Septuagint manuscripts. So for example, if you go to the Codex Sinaiticus, you'll find that it will include books like Tobit, Judith, First Maccabees and Fourth Maccabees, and Wisdom of Solomon, also Sirah, as well as other non-canonical books, the Epistle of Barnabas and the Shepherd of Hermas. Codex Alexandrinus contains all the Catholic Apocrypha, but also Psalm 151, 3rd and 4th Maccabees, and some other non-canonical works, 14 odes, which were liturgical canticles, and the Epistle of Clement, as well as Athanasius's preface to the Psalms. Codex Vaticanus includes the Apocrypha, except none of the books of Maccabees, nor the prayer of Manasseh. So it varies from manuscript to manuscript, but they were printing the books of the Apocrypha along with the undisputably canonical books of the Old Testament. Now, a different situation occurs at Qumran. At Qumran, they found fragments, at least, of every book of the Old Testament except for the book of Esther. And that raises the question, did they not accept Esther as a part of their canon? They also have certain other documents which some might argue represent scripture for them. There's a sectarian document called the Temple Scroll. Was that a part of their scripture at this Qumran sect? And they also had in their collection Jubilees and Enoch. Those are pseudepigraphic works, as well as books of the Apocrypha, Tobit and Ecclesiasticus. So did they exclude Esther? Did they include the Temple Scroll, Jubilees, Enoch, Tobit, and Ecclesiasticus as scripture? Well, we need to be a little bit careful as we look at Qumran. First of all, Qumran was a sect. It was not a part of normative Judaism. And the absence of the book of Esther may be an accident of preservation rather than a reflection of its being non-canonical among them. Maybe somebody found and robbed the caves of the Esther scrolls. In any case, ownership of a book is no proof that the owner considers a book scripture. I own a copy of the Quran and the Book of Mormon. I don't consider either scripture, even though some people do. So, can't conclude so very much. However, their commentaries were all on canonical works. They have, for example, a commentary on Habakkuk, and there's other commentaries that are there, and these suggest that they accepted the law and the prophets and the Psalms and Daniel and Job as scripture, and there's no proof that they accepted anything else. There's a work called the Zadokite work, or the Book of the Covenant of Damascus. It was a Qumran sectarian document that quotes from scripture, but it does not quote from the Apocrypha or the Temple Scroll or any other sectarian document, again suggesting that perhaps they were fairly pedestrian and run-of-the-mill in terms of their view of scripture as compared with other Jews. F.F. Bruce summarizes the situation this way in his book on Canon of Scripture, a good book to read. It's probable indeed that by the beginning of the Christian era, the Essenes, including the Qumran community, were in substantial agreement with the Pharisees and the Sadducees about the limits of Hebrew Scripture. They accepted the law. They did not necessarily accept the oral law, which the Pharisees did. Now, certain rabbis questioned the canonicity of certain books. Now, all but 5 books of the Hebrew Bible were universally accepted in the rabbinic literature, but 5 books were questioned by some rabbis. These 5 books are Ezekiel, probably because it's hard to reconcile with Leviticus in chapters 40 through 48 of Ezekiel. Proverbs, partly because it seems to be self-contradictory. Should you answer a fool according to his folly or not answer a fool according to his folly? Well, you have verses side by side which state the opposite of each other. They rejected Ecclesiastes, partly because it seemed to be so secular and in some ways seems heretical, maybe even contradictory. They rejected the Song. Some rabbis questioned the Song of Songs, perhaps because it was too erotic and doesn't talk about God much. And then there's the book of Esther, which is also secular, doesn't mention God at all, and includes some bad behavior, like marrying a pagan king by a Jewish woman is not considered a good thing. And it introduces a festival not found in the Torah, and that would be enough to question it by some of the rabbis. So the key issue is, does the evidence from the Septuagint, from Qumran, and from the rabbis prove that the canon was still open in the 1st century of the Christian era? One person who said that it does is a man by the name of Riley. And I'd like to talk about Riley's theory concerning the canonization of the Old Testament. And in summary, his theory is going to state this, that around 400 BC, the law was canonized. Around 200 BC, the prophets were fully canonized. And the writings were only fully canonized in the Christian era, AD 90, after the time of Jesus. The next video will summarize this theory in some detail.